UNESCO's directors from the Ministry of Information and also the Information Services Department. I will now invite Honorable Minister for his initial remarks. Then we will come to you for the question and answer segment. Thank you.
Honorable Deputy Minister, many thanks for that introduction. So to you, the Honorable Deputy Minister, our Chief Director, our new Chief Director here at the Ministry of Information, the Executive Secretary of the RTI Commission, Lawyer Boateng, Directors of the Ministry of Information and the ISD, staff of the Access to Information Division of the ISD, staff of the RTI Commission, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I want to start by welcoming you to this press briefing.
Usually when we invite you, it is to give an opportunity for us to talk about what somebody else is doing in their sector.
Today we have invited you to talk about one major thing that we are doing right here at the Ministry of Information, and that's the implementation of the Right to Information Act. In today's brief, our expectation is to give the entire nation, through you, a detailed update on the Right to Information Act's implementation, the successes, the challenges so far, as well as the key outstanding issues on RTI implementation. I want to start by giving a quick background on what the RTI Act is. The Right to Information Act is a law passed by Ghana's Parliament on March 26, 2019, to outline the procedure by which the right to information, which was promulgated in the Constitution 1992, can be accessed. Now, while some have thought that the RTI Act is the act which gives us the right to information, let me start by correcting the impression. The Constitution is what gives us the right to information under Article 21(1)(f). What was missing for that particular right was the procedure by which we can access that right. So Act 989 is a procedural act passed to expressly provide for the points of application, the timelines for application and receiving responses, and the remedies if you apply and you don't get the kind of responses that you are looking for, all in an effort to ensure that the right that was given under Article 21(1)(f) can be accessed by all of us. I also want to give a quick or a brief history to the Act. In 1999, the Institute of Economic Affairs first drafted the bill, which was to become the RTI bill and later the RTI Act. However, the passage of that bill dragged through about 5 different political administrations. And this long period of wait was marked by spirited advocacy by civil society, resulting in the establishment of a civil society coalition on the right to information in 2003. This period also included about 10 years of having 4 separate drafts of the bill, because as the discussions kept going, the bill kept going through various changes. Parliament finally passed the RTI bill into law on March 26, 2019. And when it was eventually laid on the President's desk, I'm referring to President Akufo-Addo, he assented to it within 24 hours. That was on the 21st of May, 2019. The implementation, however, did not begin immediately because of a provision in Section 86 of the Act. And that provision ensured that we were going to have a period of putting the preparatory steps in place until the next fiscal year. This law provides a framework of transparency and accountability in public affairs. Now, there's a framework within which the RTI Act is supposed to work. And at the very beginning, I want to take a moment to explain this framework, because I think sometimes when you listen to public commentary, you get the impression that not everybody understands the framework. For RTI to be effective, 3 organs must work together for it to happen. 3 organs. there's the supply side of information. Information must be supplied. Then there is the demand side. And then there's a regulatory side. I'll take a few moments to explain. Now, I always argue that the first and the most important part of this is the demand side, the general public. If the public, made up of you, our colleagues in the media, academia, ordinary citizens, do not demand for information, RTI will be useless. So number one is the demand side. That's the general public. Number two, when that demand comes in, somebody must be there at the public institution to supply that information. And so that's the supply side. The supply side is led by the Access to Information Division here at the Information Services Department of the Ministry of Information. And they have recruited and trained and deployed information officers to a good number of the public institutions out there, so that when there's demand, they can supply the information. Admittedly, not all public institutions have been populated with or by officers from the ATI division of the ISD. The reason is that the law gives us room, and the law operates with the understanding that from day one, you can't fill all the vacancies. So from day one, you start filling, but you can also designate other people in the institutions themselves to play that role, hopefully until such a time that you have finished populating all of the public institutions. So you will find in the screen behind me here, the demand side made up of the general public, the supply side led by the information officers from the Access to Information Division of the ISD. But whatever is going on must be regulated. There must be a regulator who is checking and ensuring that, in particular, those responsible for the supply side, whether they are ISD officers or they are designated officers, they are doing the job in accordance with the legal standards. They are also supposed to ensure that all the other parts of the law, and when it comes to timelines, etc., or reasons for refusing requests or for granting requests, they are in accordance with the law. So you find the regulator there. That's the RTI Commission. So for RTI to be effective, these three organs must work. The interrelation between these organs is facilitated by the sector ministry, the Ministry of Information. No single organ can on its own make RTI work effectively. And I must at this stage commend the three organs for working together effectively thus far. I must also make it clear that the ATI division is very different from the RTI Commission. The Commission is the independent regulatory body established by Section 40 of Act 989. The ATI division, or the Access to Information Division, which handles the supply side, is the body that we have created to fulfill the supply obligations under Section 3 of the Act. So in essence, there shouldn't be any confusion between the roles of the RTIC, that's the Commission, and then the ATID, that is the division that supplies. One is a supplier, one is a regulator. Instead, they all work together in a complementary role to ensure that RTI is effective on the ground. Now, I want to take you back to the original roadmap for implementing RTI, because sometimes you may be tempted to wonder, is it working, is it not working, is the roadmap being followed, how are we implementing it? When Parliament passed the Right to Information Act in 2019, the Ministry of Information was tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that public institutions are adequately prepared and ready to deliver satisfactorily on their obligations under the Act. And that's why we set up the Access to Information Division, initially known as the RTI Secretariat here, to lead the process. Together with the Ministry of Information, the processes for planning and developing a strategic roadmap to ensure smooth implementation were undertaken. These processes were undertaken in consultation with key stakeholders, including Parliament Select Committee on Communications, the RTI Coalition of Civil Society Organizations, as I mentioned earlier, the Data Protection Commission, UNESCO, and the Office of the Head of Civil Service, as well as the Office of the Head of the Local Government Service. It took place on the 29th of May 2019 at the Oak Plaza Hotel. And the stakeholders helped us to fashion out a clear roadmap for implementing. We have followed this roadmap religiously, and the success story of RTI implementation is a testament. Now, I want to speak briefly about the record of implementation so far, starting from the roadmap days up till now. First, let me deal with the supply side. To prepare public institutions to deliver on their obligations under the Act, the Ministry of Information established and commissioned the Access to Information Division within the Information Services Department. This happened on the 17th of July, 2020. Specifically, the ATI Division's mandate is to train, deploy, and provide technical support to the public institutions so that they can supply the information when it is requested. Over the past 3 years, the ATI Division has executed its mandate and other responsibilities with a great sense of professionalism. In 2020, an initial list of 539 institutions was put up. These institutions were identified as the institutions that should be responsible for having information units so that they can supply information when somebody requests for them. The ATI Division was successful in ensuring that 478 of these institutions were assisted to populate their information units with designated officers. And then subsequently, the first batch of 99 information officers were recruited, trained, and deployed to replace some of the designated officers in 478 of these institutions, out of 539 that we had initially targeted as institutions that must be responding to RTI requests. As at now, nearly 1,000 institutions have been identified. 320 of them have been populated with staff of the ATI Division. The remaining are working with designated officers, and our objective is to ensure that eventually we will transition from designated officers to fully fledged ATI officers from the ATI Division of the Information Services Department. As part of efforts to enhance access to information, the Access to Information Division has been staffed with personnel who provide daily back-end support to information officers across the country, be they designated or ISD officers. The division provides periodic training and support to the officers in these institutions. Our observations indicate that institutions where we have got assistant information officers posted from ATI tend to be more compliant with RTI requests and the RTI Act, as opposed to institutions where there are designated officers, and it's understandable. You can understand an institution that has an officer whose full job is responding to information requests, as against an institution where there's an officer doing something else and is asked to additionally look out for RTI requests when they come in. And so our preference is to ensure that over time we will fully populate all of these institutions. Now, as part of efforts to make the job of assistant information officers easier and to reduce manual operations, the ATI Division has also equipped many of the information units in the public institutions with computerized systems that ensure that they're able to process the requests that they get faster. The division collaborates with the RTI Commission to sensitize the staff of public institutions and the general public to enhance their appreciation of the Act. Now, let me talk about the regulatory side. I've just spoken about the supply side. Let me talk about the regulatory side. Remember, I mentioned that 3 organs must function properly. The Right to Information Commission has been established along with its full complement of staff to carry out the responsibilities outlined in Act 989. The legislation regarding the fees and charges associated with accessing information was approved by Parliament in 2020. So now when you apply for information, it is not at the discretion of the institution or the information officer to call out a certain figure. You remember that there were instances in which they called out their own figures. They became matters of litigation in court, and the court had to intervene. Now we think that that will guide the information officers regarding the acceptable cost of reproduction of information. There's a lot that the regulator has done since the regulator commenced work, and I want to speak to a few of those regulatory interventions. You will recall that the President swore in the governing board of the RTI on October 19, 2020. Since then, the Commission has worked with speed to achieve a number of milestones. A good number of them, but I want to highlight just about 5 of them. First of all, their setup and operations. The offices of the Commission have been fully set up to execute their regulatory functions. This includes the recruitment of about 120 staff who are at post currently. The Commission was fully operational within the first 6 months of the inauguration of the board. Second is the decisions and determinations that constitute a major part of the Commission's work as a regulator. Over the past 2 years, the Commission has received 101 review applications. These are applications from people who have applied to the supply side or to the institutions and were not satisfied with the response or the lack of response. And so then they go to the regulator, that is the RTI Commission. And over the last 2 years, they have received 101 review applications. Out of this, 26 have been determined. And then there's a definition for determination. They go through an entire process and come to a point where they make a determination that this information must be provided or indeed cannot be provided because of these exemptions. 4 were discontinued at the instance of the applicants, because sometimes when people make this application, sometimes even during the process of determination, the institutions end up providing the information. Sometimes maybe the person who made the application has found another source to get the information and therefore discontinues the application. 2 are under judicial review, i.e. they've become matters of court processes. And 21 of them were settled through ADR mechanisms employed by the Commission. The Commission has the power to use ADR mechanisms to arbitrate between the institution and then the applicant, and also sometimes resolve this matter without having to make a determination properly so called. Now, out of the 26 determinations of the Commission, penalties amounting to 1,310,000 Ghana cedis have been imposed on a total of 14 institutions thus far. And the primary reason for the penalties was a refusal by the institutions to comply with the Commission's orders to grant applications or to grant applicants access to information that was requested. There's a little table behind me on the screens that I think explained this in detail. So you'll find that in 2021, there were 24 applications for review, 2022, 77. That's what brings us to the 101. And you find a full breakdown of how these applications that have gone to the regulator have been dealt with. I want to talk about compliance exercises that the regulator has also been embarking upon. The Commission has conducted a number of compliance exercises across some public institutions to assess the level of preparedness and compliance with RTI requirements. The law has requirements of public institutions, and so they go around to conduct a compliance exercise to be sure that you are complying with what the law says you must have in order to respond. So, for example, you must have an information manual, you must have an information officer, various parameters. They go and they inspect and then they ensure compliance. The Commission further conducts what we call mystery shopping exercises of institutions to ascertain whether or not the RTI implementation is being executed in accordance with the advertised standards. In fact, we have found instances in which when some sort of compliance or monitoring is about to happen and the institution is aware, they put up systems that suggest that they will be complying. When you are gone, then they have moved them away. And eventually, when somebody comes with a request, you may not find it there. So the Commission also does mystery shopping to test and see if what you claimed has been put in place is really there. If you just brought somebody there as your information officer just for the purposes of the compliance exercise, when eventually there is a request, we will find out whether or not indeed you have an information officer, whether or not you have an information manual, whether or not the systems are functioning. So these compliance exercises are a very big deal for us, and it is one of the things that we note. Another matter is the issuance of received these guidelines. The guidelines issued serve as a guide to public institutions on the relevant information that shall be contained in their information manuals. Additionally, the Commission expects to operationalize offices in Kumasi and Sunyani by the end of this year, and this should improve access to the Commission's services in the other parts of the country. They will be doing more as the years go by, but for this year, resources allowing and in collaboration with other agencies, Kumasi and Sunyani should have their satellite offices opened. So I've spoken about the supply side, I've spoken about the regulatory side. Let me speak briefly about the demand side in terms of implementation. There's been some appreciable level of public education and sensitization carried out by both the ATI division of the ISD and the RTI Commission. Despite these efforts, we acknowledge that more work needs to be done in creating public awareness of the law to enable citizens to take full advantage and to access information. And here, our colleagues, I want to implore you to help us with the public education exercises. Let me briefly mention, and perhaps since I'm talking about the demand side, let me briefly mention what I'll call the performance of ATI currently, if we want to see how ATI has been faring, how the public has been faring. I don't know if you can see the numbers well from where you are, but we'll distribute copies when we are done. In the first year, 2020, about 189, when we finished and did the final reconciliation, 189, in the first year, 50 reports, that's 2020, 50 reports were received from the various information units across the country. In the second year, 2021, the reporting improved from 50 to 189. In the third year, 2022, about 382 of the public institutions are reporting to the Commission and to the division on the kind of RTI compliance works that are ongoing there. But reporting does not necessarily mean people are requesting for information. Reporting is the institutions giving us reports on the work that they are doing. What a lot of people are interested in is how many RTI requests are coming through, how many of them are being granted, etc. So you will find, after all the reconciliations that we have done, that in the first year, about 23 requests came through. The number went up in the second year, after the reconciliations, to about 247 requests. That's a very huge jump. By the third year, 2022, we received, or in the third year, 2022, we received 783 requests, 2022, across the various information units in the public institutions of our country. So cumulatively, we've crossed over 1,000 RTI requests so far, 23,247,783. Now, in terms of the numbers that have been approved or granted, initially about 16, then about 159 in the following year, and then 663 by the third year. And again, you begin to notice that there's a lot more grant that is going on out there. There have also been some transfers, so we have data on how many of the requests were transferred to other institutions, because sometimes people may request for information from the wrong institution. And if the receiving institution knows which other institution can make it available, the law requires them to transfer or to refer it to another institution. The law also gives permission to the applicant to apply for a review within the receiving institution. So the application must go first to the information officer. If you are not satisfied with the determination of the information officer, you need first to apply for review from the head of institution. That is why we often discourage the applications from going directly to the head of institution, because the head of institution will respond to an appeal that you have brought to him from the information officer. And again, if you are not satisfied, then you make an application for review at the regulator, the Right to Information Commission. And if you are not satisfied, then you go to court. So the court is not a forum of first instance now that this act is in force. If you go, the court will refer you that there's a process that you have to go through. So let me also take advantage of this briefing to inform the public that there are review processes at the institution first and then at the commission before you go to court. Now, in terms of a geographic outlay of where the requests are coming from, the majority of requests for 2022, that's about almost 87% of the requests from the Greater Accra region. Ashanti, about 9% of the requests, approximately 8.56% of the requests coming from Ashanti. Bono region, about 1.28% of the requests are coming from Bono. Oti is about 0.13%. Western region, 1.28% of the requests that have come through are coming from that place. Central region, 0.38%. Eastern region, 0.51%. Volta, 0.51%. But the bulk of the requests from the Greater Accra region, 86.97%. That's almost 87% of the requests. Savannah region, 0.26% of the requests. So there's a need to, first of all, it's understandable. A lot of the public institutions have their presence here in Accra, but in all the 261 districts across the country, you expect that if people want information, they can go through the right processes and get them. But this is the data we have now for 2022 in terms of the numbers so far. Now, I want to speak about a few other interventions that have taken place, and then I'll talk about the next steps. In fulfillment of Section 77, subsection 4 of the RTI Act 989, the annual reports on implementation have been presented to Parliament in 2021 and 2022. The report for 2022 will be laid in Parliament by the 30th of June 2023 as mandated by the Act. So I'll be doing that before June is over. It is noteworthy that the Office of the Head of Civil Service, on our request, has incorporated the Right to Information Act compliance as a key performance indicator for all chief directors in ministries and the relevant departments. Additionally, it is also an obligation. Compliance to the Act is now an obligation in the performance contracts of chief directors. And we are making efforts to ensure that the local government service will do same for the coordinating directors in the 261 districts across the country. Then it becomes part of your performance contract and a key performance indicator, compliance with the RTI Act. If you are not complying, then they will mark you down in the assessments and its consequences will follow. Now, this is to guarantee the complete institutionalization of the RTI culture within various ministries, departments, agencies, and assemblies. Briefly, let me speak about 4 major things that we are now looking to do after having given you an account of how far we have come. The ministry, through the ATI division and in consultation with the RTI Commission, is working to operationalize what we call the Online Records Management System, the ORMS, which will enable applicants to apply for information online. It will aid information officers to keep accurate records, and it will ensure a lot more efficiency because it's a digitized platform for applying and then responding to information requests. This unique platform, which has been developed in accordance with Section 18 of the Act, will not only digitize the application and processing of RTI requests, but will also transform records management across public institutions in the country. Number 2, the draft legislative instrument for the RTI Act is currently undergoing stakeholder consultation and will be laid before Parliament when Parliament resumes. The draft was put together by the RTI Commission. The ministry has made its input into it. Many other stakeholder groups are also being consulted. And once we are done, we will lay it before Parliament when Parliament resumes. Number 3, the RTI Commission and the ATI division of the ISD will embark on continuous public sensitization campaigns in the medium to long term so that all the sub-constituencies or all the constituencies in the general public, media, academia in particular, general public, are educated them more on the Act and how to use the Act when they want to access information. Remember, we have said over and over again that it is way better to employ the Act to get information than to be doing, I hear, or somebody has told me that X or Y or Z. And then finally, we are also making stringent efforts to fully populate the rest of the information units, and indeed, by extension, the entire public institutions, the entire public or the entire set of public institutions with ATI division staff. Remember, I said that our observation is that where we have ATI division staff, compliance is way better. And so we are making stringent efforts to fully populate the rest of the public institutions and information units with ATI division staff to ensure that there's full compliance. But we have some challenges, and it's important to highlight these challenges as I bring our brief to an end. We need a lot more cooperation from public institutions. There are many public institutions that have rejected information officers that have been recommended or seconded to come and assist them. And in some instances, you'll find that the public institutions that get into trouble are the institutions that rejected information officers when we posted them there. And they end up being, may I say, subjects of administrative penalties by the RTI Commission, because when they fail to therefore comply with the Act and it is reported to the Commission, by law, the Commission at its discretion would impose those penalties. We have institutions, for example, HEFRA, Health Facilities Regulatory Authority, a penalty of 30,000 Ghana cedis because they were not complying with the orders of the Commission. For some of the institutions, they will not even respond when the Commission makes a request that they should bring their justification forward. In fact, there's a commercial bank which, by this law, is subject to RTI, which refused to provide information, refused to comply. They have been fined 300,000 Ghana cedis. They are in court trying to explain why they shouldn't pay, and the lawyers of the RTI Commission are also in court explaining why they should pay, because they are required to comply with this act. For example, there have been district assemblies. Keta, is Keta a municipal or is a metropolitan? Municipal, Keta Municipal. They rejected the information officer that we posted. They didn't have one as at the time. And a request was made, and they were refusing to provide the information. Eventually, when it came to the attention of the Commission, and the Commission was trying to facilitate, and they were still being difficult, they were fined about 20,000 Ghana cedis. Some heads of institutions, I'm sure you have read in some of the media publications, including ministers, have been subjects of penalties because they are not complying. So I want to take advantage of this briefing to send the word out there that the Commission has the full power, it's backed by law, to levy the necessary penalties on persons who do not comply. We have some cooperation, it's limited, we need a lot more cooperation. When we post an officer to you, you don't pay for the officer, we pay from ISD, but it's to help you to fulfill the obligations under the Act. And so we beg of you to empower these officers, receive them so that they can do their work. We also, as many other institutions do, have challenges with resources and logistics, because when you post these officers, you need to resource them so that they can do as good a job as they are required by law to do. And we continue to work with our various partners to deal with the questions of resources and logistics so that they can deliver. I want to conclude by making a few comments, and then I will take your questions. Access to information requests have increased over the last 3 years of implementation of the Act. And we are doing everything possible through the supply side to ensure that these requests are responded to, and the numbers speak for themselves. Despite the increase in the numbers of requests, you'll notice that the rejections are very low. And so there's a lot more grant than rejections. The Access to Information Division of the Information Services Department provides the technical support to public institutions to enable them fulfill their obligations in granting access to information. When institutions take advantage of this, they will avoid the many complaints that may come up. And so please I think like the finance minister said, another matter I'd like to draw your attention to is the fact that the RTI Commission is fully backed by law to sanction institutions that do not comply. Additionally, they have now received the prosecutorial powers of the Attorney General to prosecute offenders under the Act. If you read the Act in detail, there are offenses under the Act. And the RTI Commission has now been given prosecutorial powers by the Attorney General's Department to prosecute for those offenses. So not only could you be a subject of a penalty, you could actually be prosecuted for non-compliance with the Act. And so notice is hereby served. The effective usage of the RTI Act, colleagues, will further strengthen our democracy. And so we want to encourage all actors, those on the demand side, those on the supply side, and the general public, to play their part. The ministry acknowledges the support of all our partners, the Access to Information Division of the Information Services Department, the Right to Information Commission, civil society groups that have been very, very instrumental in our efforts to fully implement it, development partners, particularly UNESCO, in ensuring that we've got a smooth exercise so far, and we look forward to do more in the years to come. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for that insightful presentation. Minister has said it all. I don't think it requires any summary, but the key point that I took from this presentation is the fact that prior to the passage of the RTI Act and the subsequent implementation of the Act, if you required any information from a public institution, it was at the discretion of whoever was there. You are either going to beg or going to find someone you may know to sneak some information. But since the passage and implementation of Act, except when such information is exempt, you are entitled as of right, guaranteed by the 1992 Constitution, to access such information. And as Minister said, you only have to pay a token that has already been set, a cost that is set by Parliament, so that the information can be reproduced. So once again, we will use this opportunity to encourage the public, individuals, groups, CSOs, academia, all other relevant stakeholders, especially you, the journalists. This is the best time to access whatever information you would require from a public institution and not prepare some reports based on speculation or hearsay. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. On that note, I will invite your questions. If you have any, kindly mention your name and affiliation and then proceed to ask your question. If you have any, yes, yes, okay. Mr. Atamans, kindly proceed. No, yeah, you take the mic. I'm not sure the production can capture.
I have a question. As he rightly said, the Attorney General Department has given the Information Commission the prosecutorial powers to prosecute institutions that do not comply. I want to find out when was that authority given, and so far how many institutions that the Commission has dragged them to court, and the various penalties that were levied on, how much have been paid, and how it's going to make sure those institutions pay such monies. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We can take 4 more questions if there are any hands. If I say, okay, John.
Yes, thank you. My name is John Awuni Kesben. Some of the RTI officers in the various institutions do face challenges collaborating with the institutions that they are posted to. So how do we get that solved? For example, if maybe an RTI officer is at maybe a particular institution like Ministry of Information and he's always having challenges with the ministry itself? How is that going to be addressed? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Sako Kraba from Kasapa FM. Having fulfilled all obligations or requirement as an applicant, on what conditions may one's request be declined? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. We can take 2 more questions if there are any hands. If not, I will invite Honorable Minister back for his responses and also his closing remarks. Oh, you have a question? Okay, please proceed. What has Minister said?
Yes, I'm interested in finding out why some institutions rejected the information officers sent to their outfit, the reasons they rejected those officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions.
Colleagues, thank you for your questions. Arthur Mensah was asking when the prosecutorial powers were given by the AG, and so far whether or not any persons have been prosecuted. The prosecutorial powers were given to the RTI Commission. Because they have the prosecutorial powers. You know, if it's a general crime or something, you know where to go. But for offenses under this act, let me draw your attention that you can make a formal complaint at the RTI Commission's offices in Jolo here in Accra, and then they can prosecute offenders. And eventually, when their offices are open in other parts of the country, you can make a complaint there as well. And let me tie that in with the question about challenges from some of the information officers in some institutions. I think, for example, if an information officer is facing a lot of difficulty within the institution and people are obstructing this information officer's work, nothing stops that information officer from drawing attention so that the necessary, whether it's administrative caution or prosecution, takes place. So that is also a word out there. But for our ATI officers, we encourage that if you have difficulties, inform the ATI division that provides the back-end support. Some of those difficulties can easily be resolved once we get involved and speak to the particular institution. If it's about facilitating your work, you know, some technology, access to the internet, basic things. If it's about instances where we find that some of the persons in the institution have a limited understanding of the act and its operation, we intensify our engagement. So the RTI Commission itself can come and do some more education and engagement within the organization. The ATI division can come and do same. But if the RTI Commission comes to do a compliance exercise, that one then is coming with some penalties or some sanctions. Yes, about 1.3 million Ghana cedis of penalties have been imposed so far. Some have been paid. Those who have not paid are the ones that the lawyers of the RTI Commission are in court asking the courts, whether it's garnishee orders or whatever, to enforce and ensure that those monies are collected or those penalties are collected into the custody of the RTI Commission. The reasons for which some institutions decline the officers that are sent there. Some of the institutions need some more, may I say, education to understand. In fact, there are institutions that are of the view that the law doesn't apply to them. And you have to explain, in fact, there have been instances where I've had to write to the Attorney General to give an opinion for the benefit of some categories of public institutions that were of the view that their interpretation is that they are exempt. And the Attorney General had to give an opinion for me to forward to them that, no, you are not exempt. You must comply with the Act. The fact that you are a security institution does not mean you are generally exempt. If there is some particular information which is exempt under security considerations, from sections 5 to 16 of the Act, provide the various categories of exempt information. That was a question that was asked. If there's some information that is exempt in accordance with the Act, you can invoke it, that I'm not able to give you this information pursuant to Section 6 or Section 7 or Section 8. But you can't say that the law doesn't apply to me. I'm sure you get me. There's a difference between the two. There's a difference between saying the law doesn't apply to me and saying that I cannot give you this information pursuant to Section 6 or 7 or 5 or the exemption that is provided under this. So a number of institutions initially were laboring under the apprehension that they are not to participate or they are not bound by this Act. We've done a lot of work to get them to understand that they are bound by this Act. In fact, under the Act, some categories of private institutions are affected by it. If you are an institution that receives public funds, or you conduct or you perform public functions, you are supposed to comply with this Act. So initially, some of them had this apprehension, and that's why they were rejecting. But we continue to educate and encourage. And we are also working with the other institutions of government to ensure that we can fully populate all of those offices. I believe I have responded to the questions. I do understand that there's a question on one of the social media platforms that Greater Accra tops the regions in regards to requests for information. What category of peoples? Is it civil servants, political class, ordinary citizens, or who are requesting for the information? It's not too clear whether you're asking who is requesting, but we do see a lot of requests from you, our colleagues in the media. A good number of requests come from our colleagues in the media, I think followed by civil society groups. Academia, students and lecturers are also picking up. And that is one major area that I think we need to highlight, that this law makes it possible for academia to request for information for academic purposes. So today we see a lot of media followed by civil society groups and then some limited academia. But moving forward, we'd like to see a lot more academia. And a lot of these requests, as I mentioned, are going mostly to the ministries, departments, and agencies. Indeed, there's a breakdown. Is the ATID presentation that gives a breakdown here? What we saw this morning. There's a whole breakdown that can show even the specific institutions. So you can file an RTI request. I'll make that information available to you. Colleagues, I want to conclude unless there are any other questions. Are there any other questions? I want to conclude by making the point that RTI is working. Hundreds of requests as we go through the years. Hundreds of requests that are also being granted. And those that are being rejected on the basis of law. And this is the update that we are providing. If you make a request and you do not get a response, the best thing for you to do is to apply for a review or to report, so that we know that indeed you made a request and it was not responded to. It will be way better to do that than to, on your own, be saying that it's not working because I applied for information and I didn't get it. You get my point? There's a mechanism for reporting if you don't get the information you are looking for or if the timelines are not met. That allows the independent regulatory body to be able to determine that X% of the requests have not been responded to or are not being responded to. That's the only measure we can have. We can't have a system where you request, you don't let anybody know, and then based on that, you say it is not working. The data available to us suggests that it is working and it's working in earnest. I want to thank all the stakeholders who have worked with us to make it work. We also encourage, moving forward, you, our colleagues in the media, to help us. We have some communication materials that we want to implore you to air for us so that the public is better educated and can work with us to apply the Act. This is a copy of the legislative instrument which we have commented on and which we are making available to the Commission, as are other civil society groups. And as I mentioned, our hope is that when it is done, we will go to Parliament and lay that LI, and in 21 days, it will become part of the RTI legal infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister, thank you so much for making time for this very important exercise. Chief Director, Executive Secretary, RTI Commission, all our directors, the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I can see the PRO for SIGA here with us. Thank you so much for making time for this important exercise. And we hope you will join us in spreading the word so that Ghanaians will make good use of the RTI platform. We have a very short documentary from the Access to Information Division of the ISD, and they would like to show it briefly as we draw the curtain on today's press briefing. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our sincere apologies for the technical challenges. On that note, I would like to once again thank you for making time to be part of today's press briefing, and also to thank GTV for broadcasting this important press briefing. Enjoy the rest of the day.